Released back in 2007, Off is a lesser-known indie title that has managed to grow quite a bit of a cult following over the years, complete with fan pages, art, videos, and the always interesting fan theories. And believe it or not, it's a game that developed in France of all places. Yeah, France. Seriously. How often do you hear about games coming from anywhere other than the US or Japan? Well, other than Tetris. And how often do you see an RPG that is clearly trying to prove that the Japanese aren't the only one who can come up with games that are completely insane? After all, when a game starts with, "Caution, it is possible that certain scenes in this game are shocking to an unwarned public," or maybe not, you know you're in for a treat. While at first glance you may be skeptical, you look at the graphics and think, alright, it's a very simple looking game built to look like an early NES title that's trying to look, edgy. Well, upon further inspection, that's really not how I would describe it. I think the game looks a little bit more like this. Imagine that time back in middle school, the teacher's just yammering on and you're bored out of your mind. When you notice the kid next to you doodling on their paper, so you decide to just look over there, glance over and take a little peek at what they're drawing, only to see crazy monsters and blood and murder and all these rough graphite sketches, and you're just like, oh my god, this kid's crazy. But then while you're reeling in your thoughts, the teacher decides to be a complete douche and call on you when you're clearly not paying attention, which startles you, and then you're just embarrassed that you got caught off guard. Plus it's math class, so there's numbers, so I guess it's like the battle system or something. Alright, so yeah, this analogy is starting to break down a bit, but I think you get the idea. The visuals here can be a bit weird and a bit disturbing. Which is actually pretty similar to how I remember middle school, really. So you control the Batter, a stern, emotionless, analytic being whose sole purpose is to purify the world in one of the best ways possible, by beating the crap out of it with a baseball bat.
Dark spirits, corrupted souls, immoral monsters, malefic beings, douchebags. I think I'm gonna need a bigger bat.
Loser.
But that's all I really want to say about the character, other than that he kinda looks like what you'd get if Ness absorbed Gygus. But really, any more would start to borderline spoiler territory, a place I will not venture to here, because Off is a game that is truly about the story. It's the type of game that you really experience more than play. It's full of creepy and disturbing imagery with a lot of dark and eerie undertones that seem to get more messed up the more you think about them. But at the same time, it's not all doom and gloom. The writing and the characters, though few in number, are pretty enjoyable and manage to have a fun tongue-in-cheek about them that really help brings levity to what could be a pretty heavy-handed game.
Well, supposing your intelligence is on the same level with your undeniable capability of dealing bat blows to an innocent cat.
Adding to the mix has got to be the audio. It absolutely encapsulates everything Off tries to be. It knows when to be eerie, it knows when to be dark, and it knows when to be goofy. I mean, just listen to this battle screen music. Well, let's just say it grows on you. But then of course there's one other track I want to talk about. Off's music and sounds really do run the gambit on the weird spectrum. But there was just one that I hesitate to call it music, but this one background track that was so genuinely eerie, so unsettling, that I actually took off my headset while traversing the areas that had it. I remember once watching a Game Trailer's Top 10 Horror Games video, and I distinctly remember them asking about whether it was possible or not to be frightened by a sprite. But I gotta tell you, when this so-called track was playing, every random encounter made me jump. Is that fitting audio at its finest? Or am I just a wimp? Both. The answer is definitely both. But really, that's what I love about video games and horror. When something scares you in a movie, you just gotta take it. But in a video game, it's go time. Well, sort of. Being a game, there has to be more here than just a story, even if it is the major draw. And Off's gameplay is, well, let's just say, it feels like an older RPG. Though RPG fans probably won't have too much to get excited about. However, let's talk positives first. The puzzles in Off are amazing. They managed to accomplish something that even multi-million-dollar AAA titles still struggle to do: incorporate tone. Similar to say how the sacrificial puzzles in God of War help to bring out the brutality of the world outside of combat, the puzzles in Off help to invoke the weird. From scraps of strange messages to books of contradicting tales. Many of the puzzles in Off just leave you wondering, what the hell is going on? Seriously, look at this. There are 2 puzzle solutions here, but you never figure it out until you figure out the question first. And really, what does any of this even mean? But regardless, even though not every puzzle may hit it out of the park or pull the same weight to it, if nothing else, they all make you think.
And just take a look at these. These are my notes, my actual notes. I had to take notes double-sided to get through these puzzles. And I love it.
It means that these puzzles aren't just no-brainers. They're actually offering up a challenge. But they still aren't so hard that they're unfair. It's a good kind of challenge. But my notes also came in handy for another part of the game: dealing with the flaws. Unfortunately, due to what is in my opinion a game-breaking glitch, I had to restart the game from the beginning from about the halfway point. Now, Off isn't too long, only clocking at about 6 hours, which is relatively short by RPG standards, but it was still a pain in the ass. So here's how you avoid it. At this point, when you're on the train with the character Zachary, make sure you talk to him like this. Do not talk to him from the side. Doing so will cause your character to walk at a quarter of his normal speed for the rest of the game. And there is no way to fix this once you saved, like I did. And I only did so because I thought walking slow in the white room was a part of the whole it's supposed to be creepy thing. And then I just kept going, and I found out that I was wrong. So yeah, now you know. Fortunately, my notes helped me to blow through those earlier puzzles again and catch right back up. But unfortunately, they didn't help me with the game's biggest sore spot: the combat. Off is, despite having a shining level of quality, still an indie game. An indie game made in RPG Maker. So it's going to have its limitations. And man oh man, does the combat exemplify that in spades. Getting past the interesting enemy design, the combat is turn-based and very boring to behold. Despite looking like a Final Fantasy game at first glance, combat's actually more akin to Dragon Warrior, and the hub screen is pretty clunky. It feels older than it is, in that it hasn't aged well kind of way. Fortunately, some smart design choices here help to ease the pain. First off, I have a problem. But yeah, firstly, despite the game suffering from random battle syndrome, it isn't overwhelming. Goodness knows the enemies here won't swarm you the way Zubats do at Mountain Moon. Secondly, both good and bad is that the combat is rather easy. So if you're here for the story and, just the world, not being an RPG fan won't work against you. Though, those of us who are RPG fans will probably find the combat to be extremely shallow. Which brings me to my third point. You don't actually have to do it. It actually borrows from Final Fantasy XIII of all games. As I'm sure all of us who played Final Fantasy XIII are well aware of, the game pretty much played itself, especially the combat. Where off makes an intelligent change though, is that it actually lets us make that choice for ourselves. At the beginning of every battle, you have the option to select autoplay and just let the characters fight for you. And while it's not perfect, the AI can pretty much handle themselves with just a little maintenance from you between fights. Personally, I just let the computer fight all my random battles for me and only took over in the boss fights, which were still pretty easy. The only real challenge combat-wise came from the optional boss battles and the optional enemies in cleared zones. So if you're not into turn-based combat, that's, definitely a plus. So with that said, Off. Is it a game for you? Well, I'll tell you right now, that Off is definitely a unique title to say the least. You won't find many games that try and tell a story the way Off does, especially in the AAA industry. But as far as the everyday gamer is concerned, well, it's a tough call. I think horror fans and those of us who really enjoy the strange, supernatural, or philosophical will enjoy this game as it's really all about the story and the world, while having an easy enough combat not to deter you. On top of that, there's a pretty devoted fan base to check out once you're done playing, if that's your kind of thing. Ironically though, despite being an RPG veterans should probably look elsewhere if they can't get into the story. But here it is, the brass tacks. Off is a well-crafted indie RPG that has both an interesting and creepy story, creepy world, characters, and great puzzles. It's also completely free. I'll have the link down in the description below. But I'd say give it at least an hour or until the first boss to see if it's for you. And if it's not, well, at least you didn't lose anything. But for those of you who do enjoy Off and are looking for some similar titles, I'd recommend Earthbound, Undertale, or Off's unofficial sequel game, 1.
So as always, have fun, and remember to keep the comment section pure, or else I'll have to purify you. For I am the better.